The soldiers' boots had been silent for 3 days. When Maria first heard the birds return to the square, she stood at her window, watching dawn paint the broken fountain gold, and realized she could no longer remember the sound of artillery. Before we continue, if you'd like to join me for more stories like this, feel free to subscribe. I share a new one every day. And if you don't mind, leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The silence was its own kind of violence at first. For weeks after the last convoy departed, the town held its breath, waiting for the next explosion, the next order barked through megaphones, the next reason to hide. But the explosion never came. The orders faded into memory, and slowly, tentatively, the people of Riverside, a name that had meant something different before the bridge was destroyed, began to emerge. Maria was 43, though the mirror suggested older. The past 5 years had carved lines around her eyes that hadn't been there when her daughter was still young enough to believe in happy endings. Anna was 17 now, old enough to remember the before times, but young enough that war had consumed most of her adolescence. She'd grown up learning to sleep through sirens, to recognize the difference between incoming and outgoing fire, to make a week's worth of food last 2. The apartment they shared overlooked what had been the town's main square. Before, it had been a place of markets and festivals, of children chasing pigeons while their parents drank coffee at outdoor tables. The fountain in the center, a bronze woman pouring water from an amphora, had been the town's pride, cast in 1887 to commemorate some long-forgotten local hero's daughter. Now the fountain was dry, the bronze woman's arm broken at the elbow, her amphora shattered. The cafes were hollow shells, their windows vacant as missing teeth. But the birds had returned, sparrows mostly, chattering as they hopped between the rubble. Maria watched them and felt something uncurl in her chest, something that had been clenched tight for so long, she'd forgotten it was there. Anna appeared beside her, thin as the light through their patched curtains. "They're saying the Red Cross is coming today," she said. Her voice was careful, neutral, the voice of someone who'd learned not to hope too loudly. "They've said that before." Father Tomas confirmed it. He has a radio that still works. Maria glanced at her daughter. Anna's hair needed cutting, hung lank past her shoulders. There was a new sharpness to her cheekbones that made her look like a Renaissance painting, all angles and shadows. Beautiful and heartbreaking in equal measure. "Then maybe it's true this time," Maria said. They ate breakfast, if the thin porridge made from hoarded grain could be called that, in silence. The silence between them was different from the town's silence. Theirs was filled with everything they couldn't say, all the ways the war had changed them, all the normal mother-daughter tensions that had been compressed and distorted by survival. They'd been closer during the worst of it, when every night might be their last. Now, with peace's tentative arrival, the distance was creeping back but changed, weighted with shared trauma that neither knew how to name. The knock came just after 9. Maria's body tensed instinctively. Knocks had meant soldiers, had meant searches, had meant danger, but this knock was polite, almost apologetic. When she opened the door, she found Father Tomas, his priest's collar somehow still white despite everything. "It's true," he said without preamble. "They're here. Trucks at the old checkpoint, medical supplies, food, engineers to assess the infrastructure." His eyes were wet. "It's really over, Maria." She wanted to believe him. Part of her did believe him. But another part, the part that had learned to survive, remained cautious. Peace was a luxury that could be revoked without warning. "I'm organizing a meeting," Father Tomas continued. "Town hall, what's left of it. 2 o'clock. We need to discuss how to proceed, how to distribute aid, how to begin." He paused, searching for the word. "Rebuilding." The word felt enormous, impossible, but Maria nodded. "We'll be there." After he left, Anna spoke from the kitchen doorway. "Do you think it's real? That it's actually over?" Maria looked at her daughter's face, at the hope struggling to surface past years of learned wariness. "I don't know," she said honestly. but I think we have to try to find out. The walk to the town hall took them past the remains of the Kovac bakery, where 3 generations had made bread until a shell had taken the building's entire front wall. Past the school, its roof caved in, playground equipment twisted into abstract sculptures of violence. Past the Petrovics' house, the one with the blue shutters that Mrs. Petrovich had repainted every spring. Mrs. Petrovic was gone now, evacuated to somewhere or dead. No one knew which. The street itself was clearer than it had been. In the past weeks, people had begun moving debris, sweeping broken glass, creating pathways through the destruction. Small acts of reclamation. Maria had helped, grateful for the physical work that left her too tired to think. The town hall had lost its second floor entirely, but the main assembly room remained mostly intact. When Maria and Anna arrived, it was already filling with familiar faces, people who'd hidden in the same basements, who'd shared dwindling supplies, who'd buried the same neighbors. She saw Emil Kovac, the baker's son, his right arm in a makeshift sling that had been there for months. Beside him stood Maria Novak, who'd taught languages at the school and now spent her days tending a small garden in what had been the schoolyard. There was old Jovan, who'd been the town's postman and still walked his routes even though there was no mail to deliver, as if routine alone could hold reality together. Father Thomas stood at the front, and beside him was a woman Maria didn't recognize. She was perhaps 35, wearing the vest and identification of the International Red Cross, her hair pulled back in a practical bun. Her face was tired but kind, the face of someone who'd seen too much but hadn't yet surrendered to cynicism. "Thank you all for coming," Father Thomas began. "This is Dr. Sarah Morrison. She's here to help coordinate aid distribution and assess what the town needs most urgently." Dr. Morrison stepped forward and spoke in accented but fluent Serbian. "I know you've heard promises before. I know you've been disappointed. I can't promise perfection, but I can promise that we're here, we're staying, and we're going to do everything we can to help you rebuild your lives." She paused, meeting eyes around the room. "But I need you to understand. The rebuilding has to come from you. We can provide resources, expertise, supplies, but the heart of this town, the will to continue, that has to come from the people who live here." Someone in the back called out, "How long will you stay?" "As long as you need us," Dr. Morrison replied, "or as long as our mandate allows. Realistically, we have funding for at least 2 years of sustained support. After that," she shrugged, honest, "after that, you'll need to be standing on your own. But 2 years is time enough to make a real difference if we work together." "What kind of help?" This was from Emil, the baker's son. "What exactly are you offering?" Dr. Morrison pulled out a notebook. "Medical care, immediately. We have field hospitals set up and doctors who can treat both acute and chronic conditions. Food aid, distributed according to need. Water purification systems. I understand your infrastructure was heavily damaged. Building materials for essential repairs. Agricultural supplies for those who want to restart farming. Psychological services. We don't need therapy," someone interrupted. "We need homes." "You need both," Dr. Morrison said gently. "I've worked in post-conflict zones for 15 years. The physical rebuilding is only half the work. The trauma doesn't disappear just because the shooting stops." The room fell quiet. Maria felt Anna tense beside her. They'd never discussed what the war had done to them internally, had focused only on survival. The idea of examining those wounds felt both necessary and terrifying. Father Thomas spoke again. "Dr. Morrison has asked me to help identify community leaders, people who can serve as liaisons between the aid workers and the town. People who understand what we need and can help coordinate distribution. I'd like to suggest a council." "Not another governing body," old Jovan interrupted. "We had enough of people telling us what to do." "Not governing," Father Thomas clarified. "Coordinating, making sure aid reaches everyone, not just those who shout loudest. Making sure we rebuild in a way that serves the whole community." "I'll do it," Maria Novak said. "Someone should represent education, the children's needs." "And I'll help," Emil added. "If we can get the bakery running again, we can employ people, provide food sustainably." Eyes turned to Maria. She felt the weight of expectation before anyone spoke. She'd been a nurse before the war, had provided what medical care she could during the conflict. course they would look to her. Maria, Father Tomas prompted. She didn't want the responsibility, wanted only to fade into the background, to heal quietly with her daughter, to let someone else carry the burden of community recovery. But Anna was watching her, and in her daughter's eyes she saw something that looked like pride, mixed with challenge. What kind of example was she setting, hiding, when help was needed? "All right," Maria said quietly. "I'll help." The first week passed in a blur of organization. The Red Cross convoy had brought not just supplies, but structure. Tents were erected for medical clinics and aid distribution. Engineers assessed which buildings were salvageable and which were dangerous. Doctors began seeing patients in makeshift examination rooms. The town, which had been holding its breath, began to exhale. Maria spent her days at the medical clinic, relearning skills she'd half forgotten, treating ailments both war-related and mundane. There were wounds that hadn't healed properly, infections from improvised care, chronic conditions that had gone untreated for years. But there were also simple colds, twisted ankles, the normal complaints of life reasserting itself. Anna had volunteered too, despite Maria's initial resistance. She worked in the aid distribution center, helping catalog supplies and organize deliveries. Maria watched her daughter interact with the other young volunteers, a handful of teenagers who'd survived together and saw the beginnings of something that might eventually be called normal youth. One evening, as they walked home together, Anna spoke suddenly. "Do you remember the summer before the war? When we went to the coast?" Maria did remember. Anna had been 12, still young enough to build sand castles and collect shells. They'd stayed in a small guest house, eaten grilled fish every night, watched the sunset turn the Adriatic gold. It had been their last vacation, their last moment of uncomplicated happiness. "I remember," Maria said. "I've been trying to picture us doing that again. Going somewhere just because we want to, not because we're fleeing. But I can't imagine it. It feels like something from someone else's life. Maybe it will feel more real with time. Or maybe we're different people now. Maybe that family doesn't exist anymore." Maria had no answer for that. They walked in silence until Anna spoke again, her voice small. "Do you think Papa would recognize us?" Maria's husband, Dražen, had disappeared 3 years into the war, taken during a roundup, never seen again. They didn't know if he was dead or in prison somewhere, alive but lost to them. The uncertainty was its own particular torture. "I think," Maria said carefully, "that he would recognize what matters, that we survived, that we're still here. Still together." "But are we? Together, I mean?" Anna's voice cracked slightly. "Sometimes I look at you and feel like you're somewhere else. Like you're here, but not really here." The truth in the words stung. Maria had been protecting herself, had built walls to survive that she didn't know how to dismantle, now that survival was no longer the only goal. "I'm trying," she said, and it was both inadequate and honest. "I don't know how to be normal anymore, but I'm trying." Anna nodded and they continued home. The distance between them unchanged, but at least acknowledged. The rebuilding began in earnest. Engineers from the Red Cross worked with local contractors, those who'd survived and stayed, to assess structural damage. Some buildings were condemned, too dangerous to salvage. Others could be repaired with time and materials. The bridge that had given the town its name was the biggest challenge. It had been blown during the fighting. Its central span collapsed into the river, cutting off half the town from the other. A meeting was called to discuss reconstruction priorities. The restored town hall was packed. Word had spread, and people came from the disconnected neighborhoods, making the long walk around the river's bend. Dr. Morrison presented options. "We can help fund bridge reconstruction, but it's expensive and time-consuming. It might take a year, maybe more. Or we can focus first on housing repairs, getting people into safe shelter before winter, and address the bridge next year." "We need the bridge," someone argued. "Families are split, businesses can't function." "We need housing," someone else countered. "People are living in buildings that could collapse in the next storm." The argument intensified, voices rising. Maria watched the anger surface, saw how easily peace could fracture along lines of need and priority. These were good people arguing in good faith, but scarcity made every decision zero-sum. Father Tomas raised his hands for quiet. We need both. The question is sequence. Maria, you've been working at the clinic. What's your medical assessment? Maria stood, uncomfortable with the attention. We're seeing respiratory infections increase as weather cools. People in damaged housing are most vulnerable, especially children and elderly. From a health standpoint, shelter should be priority. She paused. Knowing what she had to say next would be unpopular on one side, but mental health matters too. The bridge's absence is a daily reminder of division, of damage. There's psychological value in reconnecting the town. So which is it? Someone demanded. Housing or bridge? Both, Maria said firmly. We do the most critical housing repairs immediately. Make buildings safe, weatherproof. That buys us time. Then we start the bridge and continue housing work in parallel. It's slower, but it serves everyone. Dr. Morrison was nodding. That's feasible. We can bring in additional resources if we spread the timeline, but it requires patience from everyone. The room grumbled, but gradually agreed. As people filed out, Emile approached Maria. You handled that well? Didn't know you had politician in you. I don't. I just said what seemed logical. That's what we need. Logic instead of grievance. We've had enough grievance. Over the following weeks, the physical work began. Roofs were patched, walls reinforced, windows replaced with actual glass instead of plastic sheeting. The changes were small but cumulative. The town started to look less like a war zone and more like a place where life might eventually be normal. But the psychological work was harder. Dr. Morrison had brought a counselor, Dr. Nadia Patel, who set up office hours for anyone who wanted to talk. Attendance was sparse at first. Talking about trauma felt like weakness, like self-indulgence when there was so much practical work to be done. But gradually, people came. Maria saw them entering the small building that served as Dr. Patel's office, shamefaced as if seeking help was something to hide. She didn't go herself, told herself she was too busy, too needed elsewhere. The truth was she was afraid that if she started examining what the war had done to her, she might fall apart entirely, might discover damage beyond repair. Anna went, though, came home one evening and announced it casually, as if it were nothing. I talked to the counselor today, Dr. Patel. She's nice. Maria felt something twist in her chest. Pride and inadequacy mixed together. What did you talk about? Stuff. What it was like growing up during the war. How I feel now that it's over. Whether I'm angry at you for... Maria's breath caught. For what? Anna met her eyes. For staying. For not evacuating when you had the chance. For choosing to keep us here. The accusation hung between them. It was true. There had been moments when Maria could have taken Anna and fled, could have joined the refugees streaming towards safer regions, but she'd chosen to stay, believing that running wasn't always safer, that their home was worth fighting for, that Dražen might return and find them gone. I made the best choices I could with the information I had, Maria said slowly. They might not have been the right choices, but they were made from love, from wanting to keep you safe. I know, Anna said. Dr. Patel helped me understand that, but I needed to say it out loud, to tell you that I'm angry even though I know you did your best. You're allowed to be angry. Dr. Patel said that too. She said anger is just grief wearing different clothes. Anna's eyes were wet now. I'm so tired of being angry, Mama, but I don't know how to put it down. Maria crossed the room and pulled her daughter into an embrace. Anna resisted for a moment, then collapsed into it, sobbing in a way she hadn't allowed herself in years. Maria held her and felt her own tears come. The grief they'd been holding at bay finally finding release. They stood like that for a long time, crying together, mourning everything they'd lost and everything they'd become. When they finally separated, something had shifted, not healed, but acknowledged. The wound was visible now, could be tended rather than festering in darkness. I think I should see Dr. Patel too, Maria said. Anna nodded, wiping her eyes. Yeah, I think you should. The sessions with Dr. Patel were harder than Maria expected. The counselor was gentle but persistent, asking questions that Maria didn't want to answer, probing wounds she'd carefully avoided. They talked about Dražen, about the uncertainty of not knowing his fate, about guilt, survivor's guilt, mother's guilt, the guilt of small choices made under impossible circumstances that had nonetheless resulted in harm. You did what you needed to survive, Dr. Patel said during one session. That's not something to feel guilty about. But I failed people. There were patients I couldn't save, neighbors I couldn't help, because you're human, not superhuman. The war asked impossible things of everyone. You can't carry responsibility for outcomes that were beyond your control. Then how do I stop feeling responsible? Dr. Patel smiled sadly. You don't completely, but you can learn to carry it differently, to acknowledge what was truly yours to control and what wasn't, to forgive yourself for being human in inhumane circumstances. The work was exhausting. Maria left each session feeling raw, exposed, but she kept going, kept showing up, kept trying to untangle the knots the war had tied in her psyche, and slowly, imperceptibly, something began to ease. The town was changing around her. The bakery reopened, not in its original location, which was too damaged, but in a repurposed building on the square's edge. Emile had found his father's old recipes, had trained 2 young apprentices, and the smell of baking bread returned to morning air. People wept the first time they smelled it, overwhelmed by the simple normalcy of fresh bread. The school reopened too, partially. 3 classrooms in the least damaged section, enough for the younger children. Maria taught there, along with 2 other surviving teachers, trying to give the children some structure, some education to make up for years lost. Anna volunteered as a teaching assistant, helping with the youngest ones, and Maria watched her daughter blossom in the role, saw her discover a gentleness she'd had to suppress during the war. Dr. Morrison appeared beside her. Proud of your daughter? Terrified for her, Maria corrected. She's at the age where she should be making normal mistakes, falling for the wrong person, choosing the wrong major, all those safe disasters of young adulthood. But her context for mistakes is so skewed. I worry she won't know how to navigate normal challenges. She's resilient. They all are. Trauma doesn't erase capacity for joy. It complicates it, but it doesn't eliminate it. Give her credit for the strength she's already demonstrated. Maria nodded, wanting to believe it. Around them, the celebration continued. People were drinking wine someone had made from last year's salvaged grapes, sharing food, telling stories. The laughter had a slightly hysterical edge, the laughter of people remembering how, relearning the rhythms of joy. Old Jovan sat at the square's edge, watching. Maria excused herself from Dr. Morrison and joined him. Not dancing, she asked. Too old. These bones remember war better than celebration. But he was smiling slightly. Glad to see it, though. Glad to know people haven't forgotten how. Did you ever doubt we would remember? Every day, Jovan admitted. War changes people. Some changes are permanent. I worried we'd lost too much to find our way back. Have we found our way back? We found a way forward, at least. Maybe that's all we can ask for. Not restoration, but continuation. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the town celebrate its survival. The music shifted to something slower, and couples paired off for gentler dancing. Maria saw Maria Novak dancing with a man Maria didn't recognize, maybe one of the returnees, or someone from the Red Cross team. They moved with the tentative intimacy of new connection, testing whether closeness was safe again. Anna appeared breathless from dancing. Mama, come on. They're playing that song you used to like, the one Papa would sing in the kitchen. Maria's heart clenched. Drazen had loved this song, would sing it off-key while cooking, making Anna giggle at his terrible voice. The memory was painful and precious both. I can't, Maria started to say, but Anna was already pulling her up, dragging her toward the dancing crowd. And then Maria was moving, Anna guiding her through steps half-remembered. And yes, she was crying, but she was also laughing, and the 2 emotions mixed until she couldn't distinguish them. The song was memory and present moment both, loss and survival intertwined. When it ended, Anna hugged her tight. He'd want us to dance, she whispered. He'd want us to keep living. I know, Maria whispered back. I know. The celebration wound down near midnight. People drifted home, exhausted from joy, from the unfamiliar work of happiness. Maria and Anna walked together through streets that seemed transformed by music and light. The damage was still visible, but it seemed less consuming somehow, as if the celebration had shifted perspective. This was a good night, Anna said. It was. Do you think we get to keep this, the peace, the rebuilding, all of it? It was the question everyone was afraid to ask, afraid to answer. Maria chose truth over comfort. I don't know. Peace is fragile. It requires maintenance, attention, daily choices to preserve it. But I think we've learned enough to fight for it, to recognize its value. That has to count for something. And if it's not enough, if it all falls apart again, then we survive again and rebuild again, however many times it takes. Anna nodded, seeming satisfied. At their building's entrance, she paused. I'm thinking about leaving, not forever, but for a while. There's a university program in Belgrade for students who missed schooling during the war. A chance to catch up, to study properly. Maria's first instinct was panic. Don't leave, don't let the distance grow, stay where I can protect you. But she swallowed it, recognizing it as her fear rather than Anna's need. That sounds like a good opportunity. You'd be okay. Alone here? I wouldn't be alone. And even if I was, Maria smiled. I've survived worse than solitude. But you not pursuing your future because you're worried about me, that would be worse. I haven't decided yet. Just thinking about it. Think hard. Choose what's right for you, not what feels safest for me. They climbed the stairs to their apartment, both exhausted, but it was a clean exhaustion, the fatigue of exertion rather than terror. Maria lay in bed listening to Anna's breathing in the next room, and for the first time in years, she didn't fall asleep cataloging potential dangers, planning escape routes, preparing for disaster. She simply slept deeply and dreamlessly and woke to morning light, feeling something close to rested. The summer brought heat and growth. Gardens that had been started tentatively the year before now flourished. Vegetables growing in reclaimed plots, flowers appearing in window boxes, the town greening itself deliberately. People shared harvests, traded surpluses, recreated the informal economy of abundance they'd once taken for granted. Maria's work at the clinic evolved. Acute wartime injuries were mostly healed or chronic now. Instead, she was treating the ordinary ailments of peace. Seasonal allergies, sprained ankles from children playing too hard, the various complaints of aging bodies. It was boring and wonderful, the tedium of normalcy she'd thought they might never recover. Dr. Morrison's team began transitioning out, their 2-year mandate approaching its end. The clinic would continue, staffed now by local medical professionals, supplied through government and NGO channels. The Red Cross presence would shrink to advisory roles, occasional check-ins, the slow process of ensuring sustainability. At the farewell gathering for the departing team, Dr. Morrison spoke to the assembled crowd. 2 years ago, I came to a town in ruins, inhabited by people who had every reason to give up. But you didn't give up. You rebuilt slowly and imperfectly with setbacks and struggles. You demonstrated something I've seen in every post-conflict zone I've worked in, that human resilience isn't about bouncing back unscathed. It's about incorporating damage into who you become, about finding ways to live fully despite carrying wounds. She paused, emotional. You've taught me as much as I taught you, about persistence, about community, about the daily courage of choosing hope when despair would be easier. This town will face more challenges. Recovery is never linear, but you have the tools now, the networks, the hard-won wisdom, and you have each other. The applause was long and heartfelt. These outsiders had become part of the community, had given not just aid but presence, had borne witness to the town's grief, and celebrated its small victories. Their departure marked transition, from emergency intervention to self-sufficiency, from dependence to agency. The bridge reconstruction began 6 months after peace came. Engineers drove pilings into the riverbed, built temporary supports, began the slow work of spanning the gap. It became a gathering place. People would come to watch the progress, to mark how much closer the two sides of town were getting to reconnection. Maria often found herself there in evenings, watching the workers. There was something meditative about the steady progress, the way each day brought visible change. The bridge was metaphor and reality both, the literal reconnection of divided spaces, the symbolic rebuilding of what war had torn apart. One evening, old Jovan joined her. He'd been quiet lately, more withdrawn than usual. Maria had noticed but hadn't pressed. "I keep thinking about the letters," he said without preamble. "All the letters I couldn't deliver. 5 years of mail, just gone. People writing to loved ones who might have been dead already, or who'd fled, or who'd never received word. All those connections severed." "You walked your route anyway," Maria said. "I saw you. Even when there was no mail, you walked." "Had to. If I stopped, it meant I'd accepted that the connections were gone permanently. As long as I walked, there was possibility." He shook his head. Foolish old man pretending his routine mattered. "It mattered to me," Maria said. "Seeing you on your route meant the world hadn't ended completely, that some things persisted." Jovan's eyes were wet. "I'm 83 years old. I lived through one war as a child, and now this one in my old age. I thought we'd learned. I thought we'd built something that couldn't be broken again. But we didn't. Or we did, and it didn't matter. The breaking came anyway. But so did the rebuilding. Look." Maria gestured at the bridge. "We're reconnecting, not because anyone forced us to, but because we chose to. That has to mean something. Maybe. Or maybe it just means we're doomed to repeat cycles. Build, break, rebuild. Over and over until we're too tired to continue." Maria didn't have an answer. She worried sometimes that Jovan was right, that humanity was caught in endless loops of destruction and reconstruction, never learning enough to break the pattern. But watching the bridge take shape, seeing the town slowly heal, she chose to believe in possibility. It was a choice, not a certainty. But maybe that was enough. The seasons turned. Summer gave way to autumn, autumn to winter. It was the first winter in 6 years where people didn't fear for their survival, where heating meant comfort rather than the difference between life and death. The Red Cross ensured adequate fuel distribution, and smoking chimneys became a sign of returning normalcy. Anna turned 18 in January. They celebrated with a small party, neighbors bringing what they could, Emil contributing bread and a cake made from hoarded ingredients. It was modest but joyful, and watching Anna laugh with her friends, Maria saw glimpses of the girl she might have been in a world without war. That girl was gone, could never exist now. But maybe the woman Anna was becoming could find her own version of happiness, shaped by hardship, but not defined by it. Spring brought new challenges. As the town physically improved, deeper tensions surfaced. People who'd fled began returning, asking for their homes back. But those homes had sometimes been occupied by others, left homeless by destruction. Claims overlapped, memories conflicted about who had owned what. The simple categories of victim and perpetrator blurred. Everyone had suffered, everyone had made compromises to survive, and assigning blame meant confronting uncomfortable truths about complicity and choice. A community meeting was called to address restitution. It quickly became heated. A woman named Sonia stood, her voice shaking. "I lived in my home for 40 years. I fled because soldiers threatened my family. Now someone else is living there, and you're telling me I have to negotiate." The current occupant, a man named Branko, stood too. "My home was destroyed. The international agencies said I could stay here until mine was rebuilt. I didn't steal anything. I was assigned this place. How is it my fault?" Both were right. Both were victims. But their needs conflicted, and the limited resources meant someone would be disappointed. Father Tomas mediated, his voice steady. "We can't undo what happened. We can only decide how to move forward with as much fairness as possible. Sonia, your home will be returned to you, but Branko will ensure you have alternative housing until yours is repaired. It won't be immediate, but it will happen." "When?" Branko demanded. "When will my house be repaired?" When can I stop feeling like a refugee in my own town? No one had answers, only promises to try. The meeting ended with uneasy compromise. Most disputes would be resolved through a mediation process, prioritizing original owners but ensuring displaced occupants had options. It satisfied no one completely, which meant it was probably fair. Walking home, Anna said thoughtfully, "It's messier than I expected. Peace, I mean. During the war, it seemed simple. Just make the shooting stop. But stopping the violence doesn't fix what it broke." "No," Maria agreed. "It just gives you space to start fixing it. The fixing itself is longer and harder. Do you think we will fix it?" "I think we'll try. Whether we succeed," Maria shrugged. "That depends on whether we can learn to live with imperfect solutions, to accept that some things can't be restored exactly as they were." The bridge was completed in late spring, 14 months after reconstruction began. The opening ceremony was simple. Father Tomas blessed it. Dr. Morrison spoke briefly about connection and resilience, and then the barriers were removed. People crossed from both sides, meeting in the middle, embracing, weeping. Maria walked across with Anna, their footsteps echoing on new concrete. From the center she could see both halves of the town, could trace the progress of the past year in repaired buildings and cleared streets. It wasn't whole yet, wasn't healed, but it was healing, slowly and imperfectly. Emil had set up a small table at the bridge's end, distributing fresh bread to everyone who crossed. "First loaves across the new bridge," he announced. "Free to anyone who wants one." The symbolism was obvious but powerful. People took the bread with reverence, understanding that it represented more than food. It was communion, connection, a shared breaking of bread that transcended the divisions that had fractured them. That night, the town held a celebration in the square. Someone had found a generator and speakers, and music played for the first time in years. Not sirens or gunfire, but actual music, songs from before and during and after. People danced, tentatively at first, then with increasing abandon. The fountain was still broken, but someone had draped it with lights, and the bronze woman seemed to glow in the darkness. Her shattered amphora a reminder of damage that could be acknowledged without shame. Maria found herself dancing with Dr. Patel, both of them laughing at their own awkwardness. "I haven't danced in 10 years, Maria admitted. "It shows," Dr. Patel teased. "But you're getting better. Muscle memory." "Is there muscle memory for joy? For normalcy?" "Absolutely. Your body remembers how to relax, how to feel safe. It just needs reminders." Dr. Patel spun them clumsily. "This is a reminder that life includes celebration, not just survival." Across the square, Maria saw Anna dancing with a boy her age, someone she vaguely recognized from the aid distribution center. They were laughing, and the sound carried across the music, pure and unself-conscious. Maria felt her throat tighten with emotion. Not sadness exactly, but something adjacent to it. Grief for the years of youth Anna had lost, mixed with joy at seeing her reclaim some fragment of it now. After the speeches, Maria found Dr. Patel. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" "For helping me understand that healing doesn't mean forgetting. That I can carry what happened without letting it define everything that comes after." Dr. Patel smiled. "You did the hard work. I just created space for it." She hesitated, then continued. "Can I tell you something I've observed? You came to me broken, convinced you'd failed your daughter, your community, yourself. But in these 2 years, I've watched you become a pillar, someone people trust, someone who holds space for others' pain while processing your own. That transformation wasn't imposed by therapy. It was always in you, waiting for permission to emerge." Maria felt tears threaten. "I still have hard days. You'll always have hard days. Healing isn't destination, it's direction. As long as you're moving toward life rather than away from it, you're succeeding." They embraced, and Maria felt a chapter close. Not the end of her healing, that would take years still, maybe forever, but the end of this particular phase, this intensive intervention. Anna left for Belgrade in September. She'd been accepted to the university program, would be gone for at least 2 years, maybe more if she decided to continue to graduate studies. Maria helped her pack, fighting the instinct to hold on, to keep her close. At the bus station, Anna was nervous. "Are you sure you'll be okay?" "Positive. And you'll be home for holidays?" "Every single one." They hugged, and Maria felt the shift, her daughter leaving not from danger but toward opportunity, the normal leave-taking of young adulthood that war had delayed but not destroyed. When the bus pulled away, Anna's face at the window, Maria waved until it disappeared, then allowed herself to cry. But they were clean tears, grief mixed with pride. The bittersweet recognition that she'd done her job kept Anna alive long enough to become the person she was choosing to be. Walking home alone felt strange. The apartment was too quiet. Maria made tea and sat at the window, watching the square below. Construction continued, slow but steady. The fountain was being repaired by a craftsman who specialized in historical restoration. He'd found photographs of the original bronze woman, was recreating her shattered amphora. It wouldn't be identical. Couldn't be. But it would be faithful. A conscious reconstruction rather than a forgetting. In the following weeks, Maria adjusted to solitude. It was easier than expected. She filled time with work at the clinic, with community meetings, with a reading group Maria had started at the reopened library. She volunteered to teach first aid classes to teenagers, passing on skills she hoped they'd never need in the way she'd needed them. She also began writing, started simply recording memories of the war years, not for publication but for processing. Dr. Patel had suggested it during their sessions, but Maria hadn't felt ready. Now, with Anna gone and time expanding, she filled notebooks with recollections. Some were painful, reliving moments she'd tried to suppress, but others were revelatory, helping her understand choices she'd made, seeing patterns in her survival strategies she hadn't recognized at the time. One evening, Father Tomas knocked on her door. "I have a favor to ask," he said. "There's a young woman, a returnee, came back last week to find her entire family gone. She's staying at the church, barely eating, not speaking. I wondered. She was a nurse before, like you. Maybe you could talk to her." Maria wanted to refuse. She had her own healing to manage, couldn't take on someone else's trauma. But she remembered her own darkest moments when strangers had extended kindness that kept her tethered to life. "I'll try," she said. The young woman, her name was Lena, was perhaps 25, hollow-eyed and brittle. She sat in the church's small rectory, staring at nothing. Maria pulled up a chair and sat beside her, not speaking initially, just present. Finally, Lena spoke. "Everyone's gone. My parents, my brother, my grandmother, dead or disappeared. No one knows which. I came back thinking, I don't know what I thought, that someone might still be here. But there's nothing. Just ghosts and ruins. There are people," Maria said gently. "People who've survived, who are rebuilding. You're not alone, even though you feel that way. What's the point? Everything I loved is gone. The point is that you're still here, that your survival means something, even if you can't see it yet." Maria paused, choosing words carefully. "I lost my husband. Don't know if he's dead or alive somewhere. My daughter grew up in war. Lost years she can't reclaim. Our home, our community, everything was shattered. But we survived, and now we're rebuilding. Not the same thing that existed before, but something new. It's not replacement, but it's continuation. How do you stand it? The not knowing? Some days I don't. Some days I want to scream or break things or just disappear. But I have responsibilities, people who need me, a daughter who deserves to see her mother choosing life. So I keep going, and gradually, so gradually I barely notice, it gets slightly easier." Lena's eyes were full of tears. "I'm so tired." "I know, but tired isn't the same as finished. Stay. Work at the clinic with me. Let the community hold you until you're strong enough to stand alone. You don't have to decide your whole future today. Just decide to survive today. And tomorrow we'll make the same decision again." It wasn't inspiration, just honesty. But something in Lena's face shifted, a tiny opening toward possibility. "Okay," she whispered. "Just today." "Just today," Maria agreed. Lena came to work at the clinic the following week. She was quiet, efficient, clearly competent despite her grief. Maria watched her interact with patients and saw herself, the way work could be both distraction and purpose, the way serving others sometimes eased your own pain by placing it in context. They developed a routine, coffee in the mornings before the clinic opened, discussing cases, sharing the small frustrations and victories of medical work. Gradually, Lena began talking about her lost family, not just their deaths, but their lives. Stories about her brother's terrible jokes, her grandmother's insistence on traditional cooking methods, her mother's obsessive gardening. The memories were painful but also sustaining, keeping the dead present in a way that honored rather than haunted. "Thank you," Lena said one morning, "for not letting me disappear into grief. We all need someone to hold us accountable to living. You do the same for me." "Would I? I don't feel strong enough to help anyone." Strength isn't about never falling. It's about falling and getting back up, then helping the next person who falls. We take turns being strong for each other. The second anniversary of peace came in December. The town held a memorial service in the square, not a celebration but an acknowledgement. Names were read of those confirmed dead, and silence held for those still missing. Father Tomas spoke about remembering without being consumed by memory, about honoring loss while choosing life. Maria stood with Lena and Maria, linked arms with them as the names were read. When Dražen's name came, listed among the missing presumed dead, she felt Lena's hand tighten on her arm, offering silent support. The grief was still there, probably always would be, but it was manageable now, carried collectively rather than in isolation. After the memorial, Emil's bakery hosted an open gathering. He'd been experimenting with recipes, trying to recreate traditional pastries from memory and improvisation. The results were imperfect but beloved, flawed attempts at normalcy that people treasured precisely because they tried. "These aren't as good as my father's were," Emil admitted, passing out samples. "But they're honest, they exist. That's something." "They're delicious," Maria insisted. "Different from before doesn't mean worse." The conversation turned, as it often did, to the future. The younger generation was restless, torn between staying to help rebuild and leaving for opportunities elsewhere. Some, like Anna, left for education with plans to return. Others left permanently, seeking fresh starts unburdened by memory. Both choices were valid, both necessary. "We need to accept," Father Thomas said thoughtfully, "that the town won't be exactly what it was before. It'll be smaller, maybe. Different demographics, different priorities. The question is whether we can love what it becomes even if it's not what we lost." "I don't know if I can," old Jovan admitted. He'd grown frailer in the past year, his daily walks shorter. "I'm too old to adjust. I want my old world back and it's gone." "But you're still here," Maria said gently. "Still walking your roots, still part of the community. That's not nothing. It's not enough though, is it? Surviving but not thriving?" No one had an answer. Because he was right. Survival alone wasn't enough, couldn't be the end goal. But thriving required energy and hope that not everyone possessed, especially those who'd lived long enough to see multiple cycles of destruction. As the gathering wound down, Maria found herself talking with Dr. Morrison, who'd returned for the anniversary. "How does it look to you?" Maria asked. "From outside." "Honestly, better than most places I've worked. You're further along than I expected. Not just physically rebuilt, but socially cohesive. There's still trauma, still tensions, but there's also genuine community, people choosing to stay connected rather than fracturing along old fault lines. What makes the difference? Why do some places recover and others stay broken?" Dr. Morrison considered. "Leadership matters, people like you and Father Thomas who hold space for both grief and possibility. But mostly it's the small choices. Every time someone chooses cooperation over revenge, engagement over withdrawal, that's a brick in the foundation of sustainable peace. It's not dramatic, but it's cumulative. And if people stop making those choices, then peace erodes. It's constant work, daily recommitment. That's why post-conflict recovery takes generations. You're not just rebuilding buildings, You're rebuilding trust, establishing new patterns of interaction. That requires sustained effort over decades. Decades, Maria repeated. We'll all be dead before the work is finished. Probably. But your children will continue it, and their children. That's how societies heal, incrementally, generationally, through the accumulated choices of individuals who decide that connection matters more than isolation. Winter deepened. The second winter of peace was easier than the first. Systems were established, supplies adequate, people prepared. The clinic stayed busy with seasonal illnesses, but nothing catastrophic. The boring reliability of it was beautiful. Anna came home for the holidays, bringing stories of Belgrade, of university life, of friends she'd made. She seemed lighter somehow, as if distance from the site of trauma had allowed some burden to lift. But she also seemed conflicted, torn between the life she was building elsewhere and loyalty to home. You don't have to come back, Maria told her one evening. If staying in Belgrade serves your life better, that's okay. But the town needs people, especially educated people. If everyone leaves, then the town changes, becomes something different. But your life isn't about serving the town's needs. It's about becoming who you're meant to be. Who am I meant to be? Maria smiled. I have no idea. That's what your 20s are for, figuring it out. Don't let my needs or the town's needs determine your choices. Make choices that honor who you are, not who you think you should be. Anna nodded, though Maria could see the conflict hadn't resolved. It was the burden of the survivor generation, feeling responsible for continuation, for maintaining what had been nearly destroyed. But that responsibility could be its own kind of trap, preventing the forward motion that true healing required. The new year came quietly. No grand celebrations, just a collective exhale that they'd made it through another year, was still standing, still rebuilding. The bridge fountain was completed in March, the bronze woman restored, her amphora recast, water flowing again for the first time in 7 years. The ceremony was emotional. People wept at the sound of water, at this ordinary miracle of function restored. It's not the same, someone said. No, Father Tomas agreed, but it's beautiful in its own way. A conscious reconstruction, honoring what was, while acknowledging what happened. Maria traced her fingers along the new amphora. The craftsman had inscribed something inside where it wouldn't be immediately visible. A list of names, not the dead but the survivors. Everyone who'd stayed or returned, who'd chosen to rebuild. Her name was there, and Anna's, and Lena's. A record that they'd been here, had witnessed, had continued. Why put names inside? Someone asked the craftsman. Because the work of surviving is invisible, he replied. Physical reconstruction we can see, but the emotional labor, the daily choice to persist, that's hidden. I wanted to acknowledge it, even if only those who know look. Spring arrived with its usual insistence. Gardens were planted, larger now, more ambitious. Emile expanded the bakery, hired more staff. The school added additional classrooms, began planning for a proper graduation ceremony for students who'd aged out during the war, but never officially finished. Life was reasserting itself, demanding space, refusing to be contained by past trauma. Maria took on a new role, training community health workers, teaching basic medical skills to volunteers who could provide care in outlying areas. It was satisfying work, creating redundancy and resilience in the healthcare system. She thought often of Dr. Morrison's words about sustainability, about building systems that could function without outside support. One afternoon, while teaching a class, she looked up to see a man standing in the doorway. He was thin, graying, wearing clothes that hung loose on a frame that had once been larger. He was watching her with an expression of wonder and disbelief. Maria's heart stopped. She knew that face, those eyes, even aged and worn, knew it in the deepest part of herself. Dražen? The word came out strangled. The class fell silent. Everyone knew Maria's story, knew her husband had been missing for 5 years. The man stepped forward, and then Maria was moving, closing the distance, her hands reaching for his face to confirm he was real, solid, present. "It's me," he said, his voice rough from disuse or damage. "I found my way back." They stood holding each other while the class discreetly filed out, giving them privacy. Maria was crying and laughing and shaking, overwhelmed by emotions she couldn't name. He was here, alive, changed but present. "Where were you?" she finally managed. "Detained. Different camps, different locations. They moved us frequently. I tried to escape twice, failed both times. Then the war ended, and they started processing releases. But it was slow. Bureaucracy, paperwork, identification. I just got cleared last week. 5 years. We didn't know if you were alive." "I know. I'm sorry. I tried." His voice broke. "I tried to get word to you, but nothing worked. I thought you might have evacuated, might be anywhere. Finding the town still here, you here." He couldn't finish. They held each other, and Maria felt the complicated tangle of joy and grief and anger and relief. He was alive, but 5 years had passed. They were different people now. Anna was grown. The world had changed. The reunion wasn't the end of difficulty, but the beginning of a new kind of work. Learning to know each other again, integrating past and present. "Anna," she said suddenly. "She's in Belgrade, at university. She doesn't know." "Call her. Tell her." Dražen's eyes were wet. How is she?" "Alive, strong, complicated. She grew up during the war, Dražen. She's not the 12-year-old you remember. And you," Maria laughed through tears. "I'm not who I was either. None of us are." They went home together, and Maria called Anna. The conversation was chaotic, full of tears and interrupted sentences. Anna would come home immediately, she said. Would take the first bus. Maria hung up and turned to find Dražen looking around the apartment, cataloging changes. "It's smaller," he said. "We moved. The old place was too damaged." Maria watched him try to orient himself. "This must be disorienting." "Everything is. The town looks different. People I don't recognize. Buildings gone or changed." He met her eyes. "But you're here. That's the part I can't quite believe." They talked through the night, trying to span 5 years in hours. Dražen described detention, the uncertainty, the poor conditions, the psychological warfare of not knowing if release would ever come. Maria described the town's final year of war and the 2 years of rebuilding. They were filling each other in, creating narrative bridges across gaps, but both understood that stories weren't the same as shared experience. He'd lived one reality, she another. Those realities would take time to integrate. Anna arrived the next morning, having barely slept on the overnight bus. The reunion was tender and awkward. She'd been 12 when he was taken, was 18 now. They'd missed her entire adolescence, all the formation and changes. They circled each other warily, both wanting connection but unsure how to bridge the gap. "You look like your mother," Dražen said. "Everyone says that." Anna's voice was cautious. "I don't remember much about you. I've tried, but the memories are vague." "That's honest," Dražen said. "I appreciate honesty." They sat together, the three of them, in the small apartment. The silence was heavy with everything unsaid, all the adjustments that would be required. This wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was a complication, a new chapter with its own challenges. "I don't know how to do this," Maria finally admitted. "How to incorporate you into the life we've built." "I don't either," Dražen said. "I don't know how to be a husband or father after 5 years of being a number in a camp. I don't know how to fit into a world that moved on without me. So we figure it out together," Anna said, "like we figured out everything else. Slowly, imperfectly, with mistakes and forgiveness. It was wisdom beyond her years, born from experience Maria wished she'd never had to gain. But Anna was right. They would stumble forward together, learning to be a family again, knowing they could never reclaim what had been lost, but might build something new. The weeks following Dražen's return were difficult. He had nightmares, woke screaming. He struggled with the crowds at the market, with sudden noises, with the bureaucracy of reintegration. The town had moved on, but he was still trapped partly in the timeline of detention. Maria found herself in the strange position of comforting both her returned husband and her daughter, who was grappling with having a father suddenly present after years of his absence. Dr. Patel, who'd been consulting remotely with the town, returned for a few weeks specifically to help with Drajan's transition. The sessions were hard, confronting the trauma of detention, the survival guilt of having lived while others died, the disorientation of freedom after prolonged captivity. It will take time, Dr. Patel told Maria privately. Years, possibly. He's not the man you married, and you're not the woman he left. You're essentially starting over, getting to know these new versions of each other. And if we can't, if we're too different now, then you'll have to decide what serves everyone's healing. Sometimes love means letting go, but give it time before making that judgment. Give yourselves the space to discover whether you can grow back together or need to grow in different directions. Maria appreciated the honesty. No false promises, no guarantees. Just the truth that recovery was uncertain, outcomes unpredictable. Drajan started working with Emil at the bakery. The physical labor was grounding, and the routine helped establish structure. He was good at it, his hands remembering old skills, finding satisfaction in producing something tangible. Emil was patient, understanding without requiring explanation. One evening, Drajan came home with bread he'd made himself. "First time I've created something in 5 years," he said, and Maria heard the emotion in his voice. Everything in camp was about destruction or survival, nothing generative. But this, he held up the loaf. "This is proof I can still make things, still contribute." They ate the bread together, the three of them. It was slightly overproofed, the crust a bit too dark, but it was delicious because of what it represented. Drajan's re-entry into life, his reclamation of identity beyond prisoner. "This is good, Papa," Anna said, and it was the first time she'd called him that since his return. Drajan's eyes filled, and Maria felt her own heart clench. They were finding their way, slowly. Summer came again. 3 years since peace. An anniversary that no longer required formal marking. The town had integrated recovery into daily life. New businesses opened, a small bookshop in a restored building, a cafe that served actual coffee, imported through re-established trade routes. Children played in the square, their laughter ordinary and precious. Maria and Lena had taken on responsibility for the clinic. The international organizations had fully transitioned out, leaving local management. It was both empowering and terrifying. They were on their own now, responsible for their own continued functioning. But they managed, solving problems as they arose, building networks with regional hospitals for cases beyond their capacity. Anna decided to remain in Belgrade. The decision hurt, but Maria understood. Her daughter needed distance from trauma's site, needed to build a life not defined by war and recovery. She'd come home for visits, would maintain connection, but her future was being constructed elsewhere. That was appropriate, was healthy, even if it was painful. "I'm not abandoning you," Anna said during one visit, defensive. "I know. You're living your life. That's what you're supposed to do. Do you forgive me?" "There's nothing to forgive. You're making choices that serve your growth. I'm proud of you." Anna cried, and they held each other. The distance between them was real but not insurmountable. They were learning to be adults together rather than mother-child, a different kind of relationship that required different skills. Drajan was improving. The nightmares decreased. He started smiling more, making jokes, recognizing himself in his own behaviors. He and Maria were learning each other again, dating essentially, discovering whether the people they'd become were compatible. Some days were easy. Others were hard, full of misunderstandings and triggers, but they kept trying, kept choosing each other daily. One evening, they walked to the bridge together. The sun was setting, painting the river gold. They stood in the center, looking at the town spread on both sides. "I thought I'd never see this again," Drajan said. "Thought I'd die in detention, never know what happened here. But you didn't. You survived. You're here." "We're here," he corrected. "All of us still standing. That's remarkable. Or just stubborn." "Same thing, maybe." He took her hand. I don't know if I'll ever be who I was, but maybe I can be someone good enough to deserve this second chance." "You already are," Maria said. "You were then, you are now. The war didn't change your fundamental worth, just your circumstances." They stood together as darkness fell, watching lights come on across the town. Each light was someone's home, someone's life continuing, the collective persistence of a community that had refused to disappear. The 4th anniversary of peace was marked quietly. People were tired of commemorations, wanted to just live without constantly referencing trauma. But Father Thomas held a small service, acknowledging the milestone. 4 years, he said. Long enough that children are growing up with no memory of war. Long enough that we're creating new traditions rather than just maintaining old ones. Long enough to believe this might be permanent. Might be, someone called out. But we don't know. No, Father Thomas agreed. We never know. Peace isn't guaranteed. It's chosen daily through small acts of cooperation and tolerance. As long as we keep choosing it, it persists. Maria thought about choices. The choice to stay when she could have fled. The choice to help Lena when she wanted to protect herself. The choice to remain open to Dražen despite the complications. The choice, every single day, to participate in community rather than withdraw into private grief. None of the choices were easy, but they were cumulative, building towards something that might eventually be called wholeness. That winter, old Jovan died. He went peacefully in his sleep, his mailbag hanging by his door, his routes walked faithfully until his final day. The funeral was well attended. He'd been part of the town's fabric, a constant through change. Father Thomas spoke about persistence, about the power of showing up even when outcomes seemed futile. Jovan walked his routes when there was no mail to deliver, Father Thomas said, not because he was foolish, but because he understood that maintaining patterns matters. That routine is its own form of resistance against chaos. He kept walking, and that walking was prayer and protest both. They buried him in the town cemetery, which had been cleared and maintained, headstones repaired where possible. His grave was marked simply, Jovan Markovic, postman faithful. It was enough. They laughed together, and the laughter was clean, uncomplicated by grief for a moment. That night, they made love for the first time since his return. It was tentative, both of them navigating changed bodies and complicated emotions. But it was connection, the physical rejoining that paralleled their emotional work. Afterward, lying together, Dražen spoke quietly. I was afraid we wouldn't find our way back, that too much had changed. We didn't find our way back, Maria corrected. We found a new way forward. It's different from before, but it's ours. Is it enough? I think it is. It's honest, at least. We're not pretending damage didn't happen. We're building something that incorporates it. Anna seems happy. That's something. She's finding her way, making a life that isn't defined by war. That's exactly what she should be doing. They fell asleep holding each other. And for the first time in years, Maria slept without the weight of responsibility pressing on her chest. Just for a week, she allowed herself to simply be, not a nurse, not a community leader, not a trauma survivor. Just Maria, resting beside her husband, listening to waves. Returning to Riverside felt different. Maria saw it with fresh eyes. No longer just a site of trauma, but also a place of genuine community, of people choosing daily to build something together. The imperfections were visible, but so was the progress. The town was alive, genuinely alive, in ways it hadn't been even before the war, when people had taken stability for granted. Emil approached her at the market. How was the coast? Healing. Different from I remembered, but good. We managed without you. Lena's excellent. I know, I think. Maria took a breath. I think it's time for me to step back. Not entirely, but reduce my hours. Let Lena really lead. About time. You've been running yourself into the ground. It was true, and watching Lena flourish had shown Maria that her presence, while helpful, wasn't indispensable. The clinic would continue without her at its center. That was success, not failure, creating systems sustainable beyond any single person. The transition took months. Maria trained Lena on administrative tasks, introduced her to regional contacts, gradually transferred authority. It was harder than expected. Letting go always was, but it was necessary. Lena was ready, and Maria needed to trust that. Anna came home for Christmas bringing a boyfriend. He was nice, studying engineering, polite with just enough irreverence. Watching them together, Maria saw her daughter's happiness, the ease of a relationship unburdened by trauma. They talked about ordinary future plans, finishing degrees, maybe moving in together, someday perhaps marriage. Normal, beautiful plans that didn't require survival calculations. "Do you like him?" Anna asked privately. "Does it matter if I do?" "Of course it matters. You're my mother." "Then yes, I like him. He seems kind. He makes you laugh. That's enough." It's strange, isn't it? How normal my life is becoming. Sometimes I feel guilty, like I'm betraying what we went through by being happy. "That's exactly backward," Maria said firmly. "Being happy honors what we went through. We survived so you could have this, a normal life, normal concerns, normal joy. Don't feel guilty about claiming it." "Did you claim happiness?" Maria thought about her reduced hours, her stronger marriage to Drajan, her growing sense that life could include pleasure alongside purpose. "I'm learning to. It's harder for my generation. We're closer to the trauma, more scarred. But I'm trying." "That's enough, Mama. Trying is enough." The years accumulated. 6, 7, 8 years since peace. The town continued evolving. The fountain became a gathering place again. Children playing in the water during summer. The bronze woman presiding over ordinary life. The school graduated classes who'd never known war firsthand. Students whose education hadn't been interrupted by conflict. Emil's bakery became institution, training young bakers, supplying surrounding towns. Maria and Drajan bought a small house on the town's edge with a garden where they grew vegetables and flowers. Simple domestic life, the kind they'd taken for granted before. Drajan still had hard days, triggered by sounds or memories. Maria still struggled with control, with trusting that stability would persist. But they navigated it together, their shared history both burden and bond. Lena met someone, a teacher who'd come with Sarah's wave of newcomers. They married in a simple ceremony at the church, Father Tomas officiating, the community celebrating. It was the first wedding since before the war, and people wept at the normalcy of it, at this assertion that life included joy, that future was possible. "We're going to have children," Lena told Maria. "I want them to grow up here, in this town that survived." "Are you sure?" "It's hard here, still rebuilding." "That's exactly why. I want my children to see that broken things can be repaired, that communities can heal. That's a lesson worth learning." Maria understood. The town was testimony to resilience, to the slow work of rebuilding, to the possibility of continuation after catastrophe. Raising children here meant raising them with those truths embedded. Anna got engaged, married, settled in Belgrade. She came home regularly, brought her husband, eventually brought news of pregnancy. Maria would be a grandmother. The circle continuing, life insisting on itself. The 10th anniversary of peace was marked with genuine celebration. A decade, long enough that the war had become history rather than present reality. Long enough that children were growing up for whom conflict was story rather than memory. The town held a festival, music, food, exhibitions documenting the rebuilding, testimonies from those who'd stayed. Father Tomas, now quite elderly, spoke at the opening ceremony. 10 years ago we emerged from darkness uncertain we'd survive. Today we're not just surviving but thriving. Our population is growing again. Our economy functions. Our children attend school. These ordinary facts are extraordinary achievements, earned through 10 years of daily choices to build rather than destroy, connect rather than isolate, hope rather than despair. He paused, emotional. Some who started this journey aren't here to see this milestone. We honor them. Jovan, who walked his routes to the end, and so many others who gave everything to preserve this community. Their sacrifice matters because we've built something worthy of it. Not perfect, but genuine. Not unchanged, but alive. The applause was thunderous. Maria stood with Dražen, Lina beside them, Anna and her husband in from Belgrade. They were crying and laughing simultaneously, overwhelmed by the simple fact of having made it this far. The festival continued for 3 days. Music, dancing, children's activities, exhibitions. Old divisions were visible but muted. Everyone had stories of loss, of survival, creating common ground even across difference. Newcomers and longtime residents mingled, the distinction mattering less with each passing year. On the final night, Maria found herself at the fountain with a group of women, Lina, Maria, Sarah, others spanning generations and experiences. They talked about the future, about projects they wanted to undertake, changes they wanted to see. We should document everything, Sarah suggested. Record oral histories before the generation that lived through the war is gone. Create archives so future generations can understand. I've been writing, Maria admitted. Nothing formal, just memories. But yes, preservation matters. And education, Maria added. Teaching the next generation not just what happened, but how to prevent recurrence, how to recognize warning signs, resist dehumanization, choose connection. That's the work, isn't it? Lina said. Not just surviving, but learning. Using what happened to build immunity against repetition. They sat together as midnight approached, watching young people dance, seeing the town alive and complicated and persistently hopeful. Not healed. Healing was ongoing, maybe eternal, but functional, engaged, committed to continuing. The clock struck midnight, marking the transition into the town's 11th year of peace. Someone set off fireworks. The sound made Maria flinch initially, a reflex she'd probably never lose. But they were beautiful, painting the sky in colors, celebrating rather than destroying. She watched them with Dražen's hand in hers, surrounded by community, grateful for the ordinary miracle of having survived long enough to witness this moment. Maria was 58 when Anna gave birth to a daughter. They named her Jova after old Jovan, a deliberate connection to the town's history. Holding her granddaughter for the first time, Maria felt the full weight and lightness of continuation. This child would grow up in the rebuilt world, would know the stories but not the trauma directly. That separation was gift and responsibility both. Tell her everything, Anna instructed. When she's old enough, tell her what happened. Don't let her grow up ignorant. But carefully, Maria said. The truth, but age appropriate. Let her have childhood innocence while it's possible. Did I have that? Childhood innocence? Some. Before the war, and even during it, we tried to preserve what we could. You had moments. They were just limited. I want her to have more than moments. I want her to have years of safety, of not fearing what's around the corner. Then we'll work to give her that. All of us together. The town continued its slow evolution. New construction appeared. A small medical center to replace the clinic, modern and well-equipped. A community center offering classes and activities. A museum documenting the war and rebuilding, creating public memory. These weren't just buildings, but infrastructure of normalcy, the foundation of sustained peace. Maria reduced her medical work further, became more involved in the oral history project Sarah had initiated. She interviewed survivors, recorded their stories, helped create archives. The work was emotionally difficult, revisiting trauma repeatedly, holding space for others' grief. But it felt important, creating records so future generations could access truth rather than mythology. Dražen worked part-time at the bakery, spent the rest of his time gardening, teaching baking classes to teenagers. He'd found unexpected joy in mentorship and passing on skills. Some of his students were children of newcomers, others grandchildren of longtime residents. The mixing was natural now, unremarkable. No, we did it, he said one evening as they sat in their garden watching sunset. We actually rebuilt. Are we done? Is it finished? It's never finished, but it's sustainable now. Can continue without heroic effort. That's success. Maria agreed. The town had reached a kind of equilibrium. still fragile, still requiring maintenance, but no longer in crisis. They'd transitioned from emergency intervention to normal function. That transition was itself achievement. Father Tomas died peacefully at 89, having guided the town through war and recovery. His funeral was massive, people coming from surrounding regions to pay respects. He was buried in the cemetery he'd maintained, among the dead he'd blessed. His grave marked simply, servant of God, servant of community. At the reception, people shared stories. Father Tomas sheltering families in the church during bombardments. Father Tomas mediating disputes when tempers flared. Father Tomas holding space for grief while maintaining hope. He'd been moral center, reminding people of their better selves when degradation threatened. He believed in us, someone said, even when we didn't believe in ourselves. That's what we needed, Maria replied. Someone whose faith was strong enough to carry us through doubt. A younger priest had been appointed as replacement, someone committed to continuing Father Tomas's legacy. The town was transitioning leadership across institutions, the founding generation slowly stepping back, allowing new voices to emerge. It was natural progression, the healthy cycling that communities required. Maria was 60 when she formally retired. The farewell gathering was emotional, patients thanking her for care, colleagues honoring her mentorship, community members acknowledging her role in rebuilding. She was embarrassed by the attention, insisted she'd just done what was necessary. But Lena spoke truth. You held us together when everything was falling apart, provided medical care under impossible conditions, yes, but also modeled resilience, showed us that continuing was possible. That gift can't be quantified. In retirement, Maria wrote more systematically, compiled her notebooks into coherent narrative, documenting not just events but emotional journeys. The manuscript grew, part memoir, part history, part meditation on survival and recovery. She didn't know if anyone would read it, but the writing itself was healing, organizing chaos into structure, finding meaning in suffering. Anna visited regularly with Jova, who was now 5 and full of questions. Baba, why is the fountain lady broken? She's not broken anymore, Lubavi. She was broken during the war, but we fixed her. Why did war break things? It was the fundamental question, one Maria still couldn't fully answer, because people fought. They were angry and scared, and they hurt each other. The fighting damaged everything. Buildings, relationships, trust. But you fixed it. We tried. We're still trying. Fixing takes longer than breaking. Jova considered this seriously. I won't break things. I hope you won't have to make that choice. That's what we're working for. A world where you grow up safe, where conflict is resolved without violence. The conversation reflected the town's challenge. How to transmit truth without traumatizing children, how to educate about history without suggesting violence was inevitable. They were writing curriculum for the schools, balancing honesty with hope, ensuring the next generation understood what had happened without being imprisoned by it. The 15th anniversary of peace came quietly. No major celebration, just acknowledgement at a regular community meeting. 15 years was long enough that war was becoming distant, the before times something children didn't remember. The town had stabilized into a new normal, imperfect, still bearing scars, but functional and forward-looking. Maria stood at her window one morning watching the square below. The fountain flowed, children played, people conducted ordinary business. The scene was mundane and miraculous simultaneously. They'd survived, had rebuilt, were continuing. She thought about her grandmother, who'd lived through another war, who'd told young Maria that resilience was the family inheritance. We endure, her grandmother had said. Not because we're special, but because we're stubborn. We refuse to let violence have the final word. Maria had inherited that stubbornness, had passed it to Anna, who would pass it to Jova. Not trauma as inheritance, but the capacity to survive trauma, to rebuild after destruction, to choose life even when death seemed easier. Dražen appeared beside her. What are you thinking about? Continuation, how we're still here. That surprises you? Every single day. They stood together, watching the town wake up. The morning light was soft, golden, painting everything in tones of promise. Another day of peace, another day of ordinary miracles, people greeting each other, businesses opening, life insisting on itself. It was worth it, Drejan said softly. All the pain, all the struggle, to arrive here, to this morning, to this peace. It was worth it. Maria wanted to agree completely, but found she couldn't. The cost had been enormous. Years lost, people dead, damage that would echo through generations. But the alternative had been erasure, the extinction of their community and everything it represented. So maybe worth it wasn't the right frame. Maybe it was simply necessary. They'd survived because they'd chosen to, daily, through millions of small decisions to persist. We're still here, she said finally. That has to count for something. It counts for everything, Drejan replied. It's the whole point. And standing there, watching sunrise paint their rebuilt town gold, Maria chose to believe him. They were still here, still standing, still trying, still building. The work would never be finished. Peace required constant tending. Healing was ongoing. Vigilance remained necessary. But they'd proven that rebuilding was possible, that communities could recover from catastrophic damage, that choosing connection over isolation, hope over despair, life over death was sufficient to carry them forward. The long summer of healing had become years, would become decades. But every day of peace was victory, every ordinary moment an achievement. They'd survived the war. Now they were learning to survive the peace, to build lives worthy of what they'd endured to protect them. Maria turned from the window, ready to begin another day. Whatever came, they would face it together. The town, the community, the accumulated strength of people who'd chosen to remain, to rebuild, to continue. That was enough. That was everything. The bells in the church tower began to ring, marking the hour. The sound echoed across the square, across the river, across the town that had refused to die, calling people to mourning, to work, to life, calling them forward into whatever future they would build together, one choice at a time, one day at a time, persisting until persistence itself became triumph. After the funeral, people gathered at Emil's bakery. Stories were shared, Jovan's life commemorated through anecdote and affection. Maria listened and realized that this was healing too, the ability to gather around death without being consumed by it, to mourn specifically rather than adding to the crushing weight of mass loss. He was ready to go, Maria said. Told me last week he'd lived enough, seen the town survive, said that was sufficient. Was it, someone asked, sufficient? For him, he got to see continuation. That was what he needed. Maria thought about sufficiency. She wasn't sure she'd reached it yet, wasn't sure what would constitute enough. But maybe that was the point. The work was ongoing, the healing incremental. Jovan had found his peace. Others would find theirs on different timelines. Spring arrived again. 5 years since peace. The town looked genuinely different now. Rebuilt sections gleaming against older war-scarred parts. The contrast was visible, a physical timeline of recovery. New businesses had attracted people from outside, young families seeking affordable places to raise children. The demographic was shifting, becoming more diverse, less homogeneous. Some long-time residents resented the changes. They don't understand what we went through, was a common complaint. They're making this place into something foreign. But others welcomed the newcomers. Fresh energy, Emil said. New ideas. The town can't be a museum to its own trauma. It has to evolve. Maria fell somewhere between. She understood the resentment. These newcomers hadn't earned their place through suffering, hadn't paid the price of staying. But she also recognized that clinging to exclusive victimhood would prevent the town from thriving. They needed new blood, new perspectives, people unburdened by traumatic memory. A community meeting was called to discuss integration. Tensions were high. A longtime resident, Peter, stood angrily. My family has been here for 6 generations. We survived the war, and now people who showed up last month think they can tell us how to run things? A newcomer, A young woman named Sarah responded calmly. I'm not telling you anything. I'm asking to participate, to contribute. I chose this town specifically because I wanted to be part of a rebuilding, to honor what you preserved. But if you won't let me in, then I'll leave, and the town will stay insular and dying. The word dying hung in the air, because it was true. The town's population was aging, young people leaving, birth rates low. Without newcomers, Riverside would slowly empty, becoming a memorial rather than a living place. Father Thomas mediated. Both of you are right. Petar, your family's sacrifice matters. Sarah, your willingness to join us matters. The question is whether we can honor history while remaining open to future, whether we can maintain memory without being imprisoned by it. The discussion continued, uncomfortable but necessary. Eventually, consensus emerged. Newcomers would be welcomed but expected to learn the town's history, to understand what had happened, and longtime residents would need to allow space for new traditions, new approaches. It was compromise, imperfect but functional. After the meeting, Sarah approached Maria. Was that wrong, what I said? No, it was honest. And honesty is what we need. Maria studied the young woman. Why did you come here? Really? Sarah hesitated. I grew up in a city that never saw direct conflict. We watched on television, felt guilty for our safety. When the war ended, I wanted to do something meaningful. I'm a teacher. I thought I could help rebuild the school system. But also, she paused, I wanted to be part of something that mattered. My life felt empty, purposeless. Here, the purpose is obvious. Reconstruction, healing, continuation. That's a lot of weight to put on a traumatized town. I know, but isn't it better than abandonment? Than everyone forgetting this place exists? Maria considered. Yes, it's better. Just remember that we're people, not a cause. That our healing isn't your redemption project. I'll remember, Sarah promised. Sarah did remember. She taught at the school, bringing new methods but learning local context. She rented a small apartment, joined community events, learned names and histories. Gradually she became part of the fabric rather than an outsider. Others followed her example. Newcomers integrating thoughtfully, longtime residents accepting the need for new blood. The school expanded again. Maria, getting older, began transitioning leadership to Sarah and another young teacher. I've done my part, Maria said. Time for the next generation to lead. You're not that old, Maria protested. Old enough to be tired, and young enough to enjoy retirement while I can still move. Maria smiled. I want to travel, Maria. Want to see places that weren't destroyed by war. Want to remember that the world is larger than trauma. You've earned it. So have you. When are you going to stop working so hard? It was a question Maria had been avoiding. She was 48 now, had been running the clinic for 5 years. The work was meaningful but exhausting. Lena was capable of managing without her. Dragan had suggested they travel, nothing extensive but a week away, a chance to see beyond the town's borders. Soon, Maria promised. Soon. That summer, Maria and Dragan took a week and drove to the coast. It was Anna's idea. She'd given them the trip as a gift, arranged everything. They stayed in the same small guest house where they'd vacationed 15 years earlier, before the war, when Anna was young and life was uncomplicated. The coast was unchanged, or seemed to be. The same blue water, the same grilled fish, the same sunset view. But Maria and Dragan were utterly transformed. They walked the beach in the evenings, holding hands like young lovers, but carrying decades of experience. Do you remember the last time we were here? Dragan asked. Anna building sandcastles, you trying to teach her to swim, me reading terrible novels and drinking too much wine. Simple times. Were they? Or do they just seem simple in retrospect? Dragan considered. Maybe both. We had normal worries then. Money, Anna's school, whether the car would make it another year. But those worries seem quaint now, after everything. They weren't quaint to us then. They were real. That's what I'm learning. That trauma doesn't invalidate earlier struggles. Everything is scaled to our capacity at the time. You've gotten philosophical. I've had time to think. And therapy, so much therapy.